The War on Terror, officially the Global War on Terrorism, GWOT, is a global counter-terrorism military campaign initiated by the United States following the September 11th attacks, and is also the most recent global conflict spanning multiple wars. The main targets of the campaign were militant Islamist and Salafi jihadist armed organizations such as Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, and their international affiliates, which were waging military insurgencies to overthrow governments of various Muslim-majority countries. Other major targets included the Ba'athist regime in Iraq, which was deposed in an invasion in 2003, and various militant factions that fought during the ensuing insurgency. The War on Terror uses war as a metaphor to describe a variety of actions that fall outside the traditional definition of war. 43rd President of the United States George W. Bush first used the term War on Terrorism on the 16th of September 2001, and then War on Terror a few days later in a formal speech to Congress. Bush indicated the enemy of the War on Terror as a radical network of terrorists and every government that supports them. The initial conflict was aimed at Al-Qaeda, with the main theater in Afghanistan and Pakistan, a region that would later be referred to as AfPak. The term War on Terror was immediately criticized by individuals including Richard Myers, then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and eventually more nuanced terms came to be used by the Bush administration to define the campaign. While War on Terror was never used as a formal designation of U.S. operations, a Global War on Terrorism Service Medal was and is issued by the U.S. Armed Forces. With the major wars over and only low-level combat operations in some places, the end of the war in Afghanistan in August 2021 symbolizes the visible ending of the war, or at least its main phase, for many in the West. The U.S. military ceased awarding the National Defense Service Medal for the Global War on Terrorism on the 31st of December 2022. As of 2023, various operations in the campaign are ongoing, including an ongoing counterinsurgency campaign in Somalia. According to the Costs of War project, the post-9/11 wars of the campaign have displaced 38 million people, the second largest number of forced displacements of any conflict since 1900, and caused at least 4.5 million deaths, direct and indirect, in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Philippines, Pakistan, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. They also estimate that it has cost over $8 trillion for the US Treasury. Controversy over the war has focused on its morality, casualties, and continuity, with critics questioning government measures to infringe civil liberties and human rights. Controversial practices of coalition military forces have been condemned, including drone warfare, surveillance, torture, extraordinary rendition, and various war crimes. The participating governments have been criticized for implementing authoritarian measures, repressing minorities, for fomenting Islamophobia globally, and for causing negative impacts on health and the environment. Security analysts assert that there is no military solution to the conflict, pointing out that terrorism is not an identifiable enemy, and have emphasized the importance of negotiations and political solutions to resolve the underlying roots of the crises. The phrase War on Terror was used to specifically refer to the military campaign led by the United States, United Kingdom, and allied countries against organizations and regimes identified by them as terrorists, and usually excludes other independent counter-terrorist operations and campaigns such as those by Russia and India. The conflict has also been referred to by names other than the War on Terror. It has also been known as World War IV, assuming the Cold War was World War III. World War III, Bush's War on Terror, the Long War, the Forever War. The Global War on Terror, the war against Al-Qaeda. The War of Terror, from the perspective of individuals who experience the conflicts brought on by continual foreign and domestic intervention as the source of terror. Also from Sacha Baron Cohen's deliberately mispronouncing War on Terror in the 2006 satire film Borat. Cultural Learnings of America for Make-Benefit Glorious Nation of Kazakhstan. The phrase war against terrorism existed in North American popular culture and US political parlance prior to the War on Terror. But it was not until the 11th of September attacks that it emerged as a globally recognizable phrase and part of everyday lexicon. Tom Brokaw, having just witnessed the collapse of one of the towers of the World Trade Center, declared, "Terrorists have declared war on On the 16th of September 2001, at Camp David, US President George W. Bush used the phrase "war on terrorism" in an ostensibly unscripted comment when answering a journalist's question about the impact of enhanced law enforcement authority given to the US surveillance agencies on American civil liberties. This is a new kind of evil, and we understand, and the American people are beginning to understand. This crusade, this war on terrorism is going to take a while, and the American people must be patient. I'm going to be patient. The reference to crusades became subject to heavy criticism due to its controversial connotations in the Muslim world and historical Muslim-Christian relations. On the 20th of September 2001, during a televised address to a joint session of Congress, George Bush said, "Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped and defeated." In April 2007, the British government announced publicly that it was abandoning the use of the phrase "war on terror" as they found it to be less than helpful. This was explained more recently by Lady Eliza Manningham Buller. In her 2011 Reith lecture, the former head of MI5 said that the 9/11 attacks were a crime, not an act of war, so I never felt it helpful to refer to a war on terror. US President Barack Obama rarely used the term, but in his inaugural address on the 20th of January 2009, he stated, "Our nation is at war against a far-reaching network of violence and hatred." In March 2009, the Defense Department officially changed the name of operations from Global War on Terror to Overseas Contingency Operation, OCO. In March 2009, the Obama administration requested that Pentagon staff members avoid the use of the term and instead use Overseas Contingency Operation. Basic objectives of the Bush administration war on terror, such as targeting Al-Qaeda and building international counter-terrorism alliances, remain in place. In May 2010, the Obama administration published a report outlining its national security strategy. The document dropped the Bush-era phrase "global war on terror" and reference to Islamic extremism, and stated, "This is not a global war against a tactic, terrorism or a religion, Islam. We are at war with a specific network, Al-Qaeda, and its terrorist affiliates who support efforts to attack the United States, our allies and partners." Usage of the term "war on terror" was initially discontinued in May 2010 and again in May 2013. On the 23rd of May 2013, US President Barack Obama announced that the war on terrorism was over, saying that the US would not wage war against a tactic, but would instead focus on a specific group of terrorist networks. Other American military campaigns during the 2010s have also been considered part of the war on terror by individuals and the media. The rise of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria during 2014 to 2015 led to the global Operation Inherent Resolve and an international campaign to destroy the terrorist organization. This was considered to be another campaign of the war on terror. In December 2012, Jer Johnson, the General Counsel of the Department of Defense, speaking at Oxford University, stated that the war against Al-Qaeda would end when the terrorist group had been weakened so that it was no longer capable of strategic attacks and had been effectively destroyed. At that point, the war would no longer be an armed conflict under international law, and the military fight could be replaced by a law enforcement operation. In May 2013, 2 years after the assassination of Osama bin Laden, Barack Obama delivered a speech that employed the term "global war on terror," put in quotation marks, as officially transcribed by the White House. "Now make no mistake, terrorists still threaten our nation," he awful. "In Afghanistan, we will complete our transition to Afghan responsibility for that country's security. Beyond Afghanistan, we must define our effort not as a boundless global war on terror, but rather as a series of persistent, targeted efforts to dismantle specific networks of violent extremists that threaten America. In many cases, this will involve partnerships with other countries." Nevertheless, in the same speech, in a bid to emphasize the legality of military actions undertaken by the US, noting that Congress had authorized the use of force, he went on to say, "Under domestic law and international law, the United States is at war with Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and their associated forces. We are at war with an organization that right now would kill as many Americans as they could if we did not stop them first. So this is a just war. a war waged proportionally in last resort and in self-defense. Nonetheless, the use of the phrase war on terror persists in US politics. In 2017, for example, US Vice President Mike Pence called the 1983 Beirut barracks bombing the opening salvo in a war that we have waged ever since, the global war on terror.